Welcome to today's video. We are going to go over our first quarter reading stats. We're going to go over the goals that we have for the year. Starting with that, our first goal was to read 72 books this year. We are currently up to 27 of the 72 books, so we are progressing. I do want to reread one book per month. March, I read so many rereads. We are up to 7 out of the 12 rereads. I have no doubt that I will be able to hit that goal this year. Next goal was to have 60% of my physical TBR read. I bought a ton of books in March, and we are now down to 49.35%. So not doing too hot on that. I do need to watch what I'm buying. We also have our 23 books in 2023 that we want to read. Of those books, I have read 2 of the 23 books for this year. And then I want to read 10 nonfiction books this year, and I am up to 2 of 10 nonfictions, which typically read more nonfictions in November for nonfiction November, so that'll add up. And then as long as I'm reading 1 per month, I should be just fine to hit that goal. Going to our stats, so far this year we have read 8,542 pages total, average of 316 pages per book, and then an average rating of 3.74. I read a ton of rereads last month that I knew were 5 stars. They had been 5 stars before, so I do think I'm having such a good year because I'm rereading, and that's kind of one of the reasons that I'm trying to add in rereading. Looking at the spread of where those books are, there's no surprise about the amount of mystery, thriller, and horror percentage. I am surprised about the YA fantasy. I don't think that that's going to hold up. These are all the books that I read this year that I have physical. There were a few books that I did read in the year that I've already gotten rid of because I just did not enjoy them in any way, or I have borrowed from the library. And I'm surprised by the amount of YA, but I did read the whole Scholomance trilogy, so, and given the fact that I've read 27 books, that's 3 of them plus 4, so I'm kind of not surprised by the amount of YA fantasy, and I don't think it's going to be such a big percentage by the end of the year. I'm going to go down the list of all the books that I've read this year and give a quick review. Bad Blood, 5-star, about Theranos co-founder Elizabeth Holmes, about kind of the scandal of her trying to build, you take a drop of blood and you can do all this testing, and all the scandal and kind of manipulation behind that. This was a nonfiction. Birthday Girl by Penelope Douglas. This was a reread of mine, a spicy romance about this girl who moves in with the boyfriend's dad's house. The boyfriend cheats on her and leaves her. And now she's living at the boyfriend's dad's house, and woohoo. Great tension, great build up. Is a slow burn. Great smut scenes. Absolutely recommend. Love this book. Insomnia by Sarah Pinborough. One of the reasons this got me is how absolutely short the synopsis is. This is about a woman whose mother at a certain age stopped sleeping, and she's coming up on that age, and now she's having trouble sleeping. She has this fear that she's going to repeat what happened with her mother. This was a good slow burn, kind of a slow atmosphere, spooky book, kind of a little bit of mental twist on your mind. Do recommend. Enjoyed it. Harry Potter and the Chamber of Secrets. This is the second in the Harry Potter series. I am going to try and get through all the Harry Potters this year. That's not an official thing or anything. It may not even happen, but I love Harry Potter. I've watched the movies more than I've read the books, but you can't go wrong with Harry Potter. A Good Marriage by Kimberly McCreight. This is about a woman. She's a lawyer. She gets a call from this guy that she went to law school with, and he needs law help, and she gets sucked into that. It was the perfect traditional mystery thriller that I needed at the time, which is why I read it. I highly enjoy it. I would reread it again. The kind of the twists and turns, the mental games, and all of it, it just really worked for me. The Last House on Needless Street, I was a little disappointed in this. I would say it was overall good. I was hoping for a little bit more spook, but essentially this guy lives in this house and like doesn't come out and is just kind of weird. There's this little girl that lives in there and this cat, and I don't know, it was a little weird, a little slow. It got that spook factor. I don't know what it was missing for me, but overall it just didn't live up to my expectations. I Rise Under the Sea by Julia Armfeld. This is a great book about a woman whose wife has come back from this submarine mission that kind of went wrong, and things just are not the same. She's trying to figure it out. This has just a little hint of like what, it's just weird. It's really short, but it's like slow paced, and just, it's just got this whole time of like you are trying to figure out what's going on and you just don't know, but like nobody knows. And it's just, I don't know how to explain it. It's a weird book, but I like. Window Shopping by Tessa Bailey. Highly disappointed in this book. I have read It Happened One Summer, and I plan to read the follow-up, hook, line, and sinker on that. This is about a woman who gets out of jail. She goes and gets this job being a window display maker, and she falls in love with her boss. I didn't like the characters. I just felt like there was trying to be more to the story, and then they would just throw this bit in, and it just didn't all come together, and there just needed to be more for something. I was disappointed in this book. Maybe if I had read it during the appropriate season of like that holiday stuff, it would have worked for me a little bit more, but overall, not too much of a fan of this. Goddess Effect is one I have a Kindle version of and then got from my local library, about a woman who gets kind of caught up in the health and fitness mentality that you see on social media, but there's a little bit of this like creepy mystery thriller element to it. Overall, it was really good. You don't really enjoy the character, but that's kind of how it's written and the vibes that you're supposed to get. Overall, it wasn't bad. I wouldn't say I was like super excited about it, but it was good. I could have used a little bit more mystery thriller. Overall, it was good. Velvet Was the Night by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is 1970s Mexico, about this girl's neighbor asks her to watch her cat, but then she goes missing. She's trying to figure out what the heck's going on. Good book, good writing, good atmosphere. Definitely got that really good historical fiction about it. I'm just not a huge historical fiction reader. I can't say that there's anything wrong with this book, especially if you're a historical fiction reader. I think you would really enjoy it. Black Girl, White Girl by Patricia Moyes. I did get rid of this book. It's in the middle of a series. That may be been my issue, about this detective who's asked to go to this Caribbean island to figure out where these drugs are coming from. It was just boring and like just no development. Bad book. I did not enjoy it. I wish I would have DNF'd it, but it was so short. Just bust through it. The Witch Hunter by Matt Sieg. I've read this before. Loved it. This is about a detective, Jessica Niemi, who's investigating this murder of this man's wife, but the murder followed very closely a fictional book that he wrote, and it's just creepy, but then more murders keep happening, and it's what's going on. There's so much little Easter eggs, if you will, throughout the book, that even though I've read this before, there's still stuff that I caught, and even though I know what's going to happen, you get that suspense. You get that like, oh my gosh, it's going to happen. And you just see more every time you read it. Absolutely love. Highly recommend. Shiver by Allie Reynolds. Another absolute 5-star. Loved this book. Loved the atmosphere. Loved the characters. Loved the tension. Great book. This is about a girl who used to be a professional snowboarder, and during one of these snowboarding summers, one of the friends ended up dying, but then they all get invited after she went missing. And after she's officially declared dead, they get invited to go back to where it all happened. But it's like during off season, so it's like all shut down and there's not all these people, and things just go haywire again. Close circle mystery. Love it. Perfect. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. I did want to read it all, but my goal was to at least read Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass, because this is, I think, pretty much all Lewis and Carroll's stories and poems and kind of like his fiction work. Love Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. Can't get behind the rest, but go check it out. I do love Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, the movie. Worlds Were Meant to Break by Natalie Williamson. This is a YA romance. Full disclosure, I do have bias because I do know the author. I went to school with her growing up, and this is about a young girl whose mother kind of brings men in and out of her life, and to protect herself, she develops these set of rules she's going to live by. However, in this current relationship, her mother she has to decide if those rules are worth following, and I loved the aspects of where we live and where we went to school, and just things in our lives that you could parallel that was really fun to see in the book. And I think she did a great job at character building, kind of developing those relationships that you have with the character and the relationships the characters have together. I think she did an excellent job. The Grace Year by Kim Liggett. This was such a good book that I wasn't expecting. This is a YA fantasy about these women are perceived in this place that they call the county, that they have all these like magical power, like essentially they can use their womanism to kind of manipulate and lure men into things that they shouldn't. And one of the things that they have to do is at their grace year, they go off to this island and they have to rid themselves of their magic. Gives you a little bit of the Lord of the Flies vibes, which is another book that I absolutely love. I think that this has some great topics that it talks about in kind of its own way that you could parallel to the world that we see. It starts off with a bang, gets a little slow, builds back up. I thought the story was great. The characters were great. The tension was good. The writing, everything. I think she did a good job. Just like Home by Sarah Gailey, very disappointed in this book. This is a horror book about this woman whose father is descended from a serial killer, and then she like leaves, but now her mother is dying and has asked her to kind of come back, take care of the house. But her mother has this random man living in this back piece of their house, but the house is like doing weird stuff. The book's really slow pace. I don't know, I didn't connect with it. I really loved the end. Hitting myself. I really love the ending. I wish that would have been more of the book because it kind of felt like it came out of nowhere and it didn't quite build up to that ending. Not that I didn't like the ending, but overall I was just really disappointed in this book. Maybe it's just not my kind of horror. But Where the Sidewalk Ends by Shel Silverstein. This is a book of poems for younger kids, and I ended up reading it with my kids because it's got like fun pictures, and this was what I unwrapped for my March blind date with the book. I'll link that below or above. I'll link it. And I had a lot of fun with this book. I would read it again, and I think they would too. Lakewood by Megan Giddings. This is kind of a medical horror, in my opinion, about a woman whose grandmother has died. Her mother has a lot of medical bills. She gets asked to kind of come do this medical kind of testing experimentation. She goes there to this place called Lakewood, and she's getting paid hell good, but it is weird and spooky. Gives me the movie The Experiment vibes, and overall it does have its very gory moments, but it's just this like low sense of just something's off, and it's like kind of obvious but kind of not. It's weird. Highly recommend. The Daughter of Dr. Moreau by Sylvia Moreno Garcia. This is based off of the island of Dr. Moreau. So Carlota daughter is Dr. Moreau, and he builds hybrids on this, like, on the Yucatan, which is kind of like this secluded area. And this guy Montgomery comes to kind of help take care of these hybrids. And then the people, the Lisdales, who like own the land and all the work that Dr. Moreau's doing, has come to get what they think is owed to them, which is the hybrids. And it's kind of their escape. It's very slow historical fiction. It does pick up towards the end. I thought it was good. I wish I wouldn't got to see like the hybrid building and more of that aspect. That was not the purpose of this book. I would say my only critique, that like major critique, again, I say it every time, and I said it with 56 Days. I don't like it when authors give you a chapter from one point of view and then go the next chapter from the other point of view. We'll have the conversations the same and just a lot of redundancy. I don't like that. It doesn't work for me. I don't mind dual timeline, but that just doesn't work for me. Set on You by Amy Leah. This is a romance, slight rom-com to it, about a fitness influencer who's at her gym, and this gentleman comes along and steals her squat rack, and she calls him squat rack thief, and finds out there's a connection and their budding relationship. Absolutely love the character building, the funniness. I liked how kind of lighthearted and fun the relationship was. It was never too intense and heavy. I love the writing, I love the pacing, I love the story. Overall, I think it's really good. This is part of a series called The Influencer, and I will continue to read. This is Truman Capote's In Cold Blood. This is a nonfiction about a family who was brutally murdered out in western Kansas. I obviously am from Kansas, so this was a book that my father recommended to me a long time ago, and I read it. I've read it before. I've enjoyed it. It was a reread and good book. Highly recommend. Winter's Orbit by Irvina Maxwell. This is a science fiction with a little bit of a romance. Prince Cam gets married off an arranged marriage to a gentleman whose husband has recently passed away, and they're kind of thinking that his death was in a very mysterious way, and they're trying to solve it. But one of the things is that this is science fiction, so they have different galaxies and planets, and the reason that these two have to be married is for the treaty between the two planets that they're trying to save, and people aren't quite buying their relationship, and so they're trying to save this treaty for their planets, but also figure out what happened to his husband, and did he really have an accident, or was it murder or something more. I loved the characters' chemistry, the characters' relationships, the character building, all of that stuff. The world was great. It was a little long for me, and it's very descriptive in the science fiction-y way that it's very typical science fiction. So overall, I think it's a really great sci-fi book. I'm not too heavy into the sci-fi world, but I did enjoy it, and I think I'll still pick up the second one. Although I figured out I don't think it's the same people, which kind of makes me sad, because I really liked the characters in this book and the world building, and recommend Tall Grass by Stephen King and Joe Hill. This is a short story horror, and I will say I understand how the book is good. So essentially this is about a brother and sister. The sister's pregnant. They're on this kind of cross-country trip. They're driving through Kansas, and there's this really tall grass, and they hear this little boy calling for help, and they're like, we gotta help. So they get out and they go to help get this little boy out of this really tall grass, and then they get in the grass, and there you go. Very fast-paced, gory, action-packed. It's like 62-page book. Super short book. I will say, spoiler alert right here. Read the trigger warnings, because this is, if I had seen trigger warnings, or really, and maybe I missed them, but I didn't see trigger warnings, I would not have read this book, because this is a book about the pregnant girl gets beaten, she miscarries her baby, and then they eat the baby. And I don't want to read about miscarriage. I don't want to read about cannibalism of a miscarried baby. Like, that's just, those are topics that, especially in the amount of detail and description that this book had, I didn't want to read. But it's like so short. It's like there and then it's over. So that's why I'm giving it such a low rating, but I understand why others may enjoy the book a lot more. Last but not least, we read all 3 of Naomi Novik's Scholomance series. I have already read the first 2, A Deadly Education and The Last Graduate. I gave both of these 5 stars, and I'm giving The Golden Enclaves 5 stars. I'm not going to say too much about exactly what happens in this book, because I don't want to spoil anything if you haven't read. But essentially there is a school called a Scholomance that magical kids go into, and then they don't leave until they graduate. But this school is a deadly school, and it's kind of like its own living, breathing creature. But there's what they call Malapakari that are trying to get them, which are just pretty much little creatures who are trying to get them, and they have to survive in the school, and they have to learn, and then they have to fight their way out on graduation. Elle, the main character, has had this prophecy saying like she's going to be such an evil person, and then she kind of develops this relationship with Orion, who can kill pretty much any Mal, and like that's his passion and his love. It's kind of the relationship and how they're dealing with this world in the school. I will say The Golden Enclaves is the first one outside of the school, and you get a little bit more of that world outside of what that school is and all the dynamics of the enclaves that are there. And I love these books. I love the world building. I love the character building, everything. I can't talk highly enough about these books, and I love them. Go check them out. I'll see you in the next one.